This evening, a deep cutoff low was drifting eastward from Arizona into New Mexico, generating a deep fetch of southwesterly flow and a sort of pineapple express for the southern plains. This is what it looked like outside here in Texas just a few minutes ago, a dreary weather pattern with widespread fog, drizzle, and stratus, from Shreveport to Austin to Oklahoma City, and as far west as Amarillo. There's the surface map this afternoon. We have to shift south to see some of these details, and there we do see the warm sector around Saltillo, back to Torreon. Temperatures, is that 93? Yeah, let's take a look at digital atmosphere. It was 93 degrees there, but up to the north, cooler air flowing in, and that marks the location of the cold front. So, of course, that puts a lot of Texas north of the warm front. Down to the south, there's the tropical air, mid-70s, deep southeasterly flow, and those dew points coming up to 70 degrees at Brownsville. And then we head north, an occlusion through northern New Mexico, and we can actually see the cutoff low reflected in that thickness field located over Arizona, with snow showers and rain showers across much of the state. It is rather impressive on the satellite imagery. There you can see the jet stream dynamics coming from central Mexico into Texas, the cutoff low up to the north, but right here in northwestern Mexico you can see some thunderstorms developing. They've actually got lightning and thunder just south of the border. This is a look at the water vapor channel. We see the strong subsidence behind the main baroclinic weather system, and further to the west, that's going to be the cutoff low, supported by the very steep lapse rates. And we shift a little bit closer to the action. A couple things we can see here. One is the ridging in the upper levels, the troughing further to the south, and there is the cutoff low. In fact, if you watch the rotation, you can get some sense of where exactly that is. That's going to be right in this area here, where you've got that strong east to west flow and the slow west to east component. So in between, that's going to be your zone of rotation. Here's a look at the conventional 500 millibar heights and vorticity. The vortex center right around Grants, New Mexico at this hour. A channeled jet around the periphery of that upper level low. And there could be some short waves embedded within that flow. I don't see anything obvious here, probably a couple lobes, maybe one there in the panhandles, maybe another. That could be more of a jet max signature down there. And we can sort that out with Q vectors, and I do think that is a jet max causing these upward and downward motion fields. This right here is the left front quadrant of that jet max. This is the left rear quadrant, which tends to be subsident. And there's nothing to the south because that is canceled out by the curvature of the flow. You've probably seen this type of diagram. This is what exists down there in Mexico, the strong upward motion on the inside of that curvature ahead of the jet max. Now we've got these other vertical motion areas here. These could be terrain interaction. This here, I think that is probably some upper level lift associated with a shortwave. The axis pretty much right around Clayton to Guyman, and the upward motion field in Colorado. In the northeastern states, we've got cold advection once again. Lake effect snows picking up rapidly on the east side of these lakes. This afternoon we saw extreme cold in northern Maine. Caribou is only expecting 11 for a high. Elsewhere, 30s down south into New York and Pennsylvania, 40s along the coast, and 50s in Maryland, with 60s in Virginia. We had snow squall warnings earlier this afternoon in Massachusetts. That's going to be this system here, actually that one right there. See that propagating eastward? It heads offshore very quickly. And finally, we're starting to see a reduction in the aerial extent of that precipitation. Winter storm warning until 1 a.m. for a large area of the Lake Ontario snowbelt. Not only Oswego and Watertown, but Utica, Little Falls, Boonville, and the western Adirondacks. Looking for 3 to 6 inches of snow there. A large part of New York. In the western and central regions, under winter weather advisories for today. Looking for 2 to 4 inches of snow there. That does extend down to the Catskills. The Lake Erie snowbelt also active, but that advisory ends early this afternoon. Jamestown, Smethport, Coudersport, Wellsville, and Geneseo, we're looking for about 1 to 4 inches of snow. Winter storm warning, southern Vermont near Bennington until 1 a.m., mostly above 1,500 feet, 3 to 7 inches possible there, 1 to 3 inches in the lower elevations. Winter weather advisory all up and down the mountains in Vermont today, early tonight. And pretty busy up there. Wind advisory all through the northeastern U.S. High wind warning for far eastern West Virginia, right in here in the Shenandoah Mountains, extending into western Maryland, Hagerstown, and Cumberland. That expires at 6 p.m. West winds gusting to 60 miles an hour. Okay, did everybody catch all that? Yeah, they've been getting slammed big time. And checking out the weather in the southeast, we've got fair skies, temperatures in the 60s and 70s as far north as the coastal Carolinas. Hard to believe that we had snow on the ground about a week ago. Big change. We've kind of shifted gears into spring here. So we do see a weather system out to the west, increase in clouds. We'll take a look at the southern plains, and there we see our massive weather system, the combined deep southwesterly flow, the Bear Clinic zone right there, the overrunning, and of course the cold core convection circulating out there in the Four Corners and Arizona. Winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings all through the Sangre de Cristos, the San Juan Mountains, and even on the plains of eastern Colorado. This is due to the proximity of that cutoff low there. And we've also got wind advisories all through the Sacramento Mountains into the mountains of far west Texas. High wind warning further south that runs for most of tomorrow. And they are expecting winds up to 70 miles an hour. There's a flood watch from the Dallas-Fort Worth area to Fort Smith, Little Rock, all the way up to Paducah. Looking for 2 to 3 inch amounts in that zone late tonight into tomorrow, and there could be some isolated amounts up to 5 to 7 inches. Here's what's causing that precipitation, the aqua colors indicating over 1 inch of precipitable water. So if you squeezed out the whole vertical column of air and put it in a rain gauge, you would get over 1 inch where that aqua is. And you can see some purples coming in. That's 1.5 inches later tonight. So that's going to feed any showers and storms that get organized through that area. And we go into tomorrow during the afternoon and evening, quite a bit of moisture and probably a line of thunderstorms marching into the lower Mississippi River region. The Storm Prediction Center looking at a marginal risk for tonight from the Edwards Plateau into the Dallas area. Then for tomorrow, slight risk in Louisiana and southeastern Texas. The main threat is going to be strong downburst winds, but there could be a few tornadoes. Here's the 850 millibar chart at about 5,000 feet. We see a weak low-level jet along Interstate 35, winds about 30 knots. Then going into the nighttime hours, they pick up to 45 knots, and then we see 50 knots by daybreak across much of East Texas. So as we go into peak heating for tomorrow, 60 knots up there at 1.5 kilometers. That is going to be supportive of organized thunderstorms. So severe weather is certainly something we're going to have to keep an eye on, especially down south where we have the better instability. At the current time, the radar out of Fort Worth does show a few showers and thunderstorms, nothing organized at this time. The activity extending from the Red River down through Stephenville, Granbury, and all the way down towards Llano. The current forecast from the High Resolution Rapid Refresh does indicate an increase in aerial extent, especially around the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Not too sure if we're going to see much organization tonight. This appears to be dominated by warm advection, but there could be a few isolated storms within that or ahead of that cluster. It will continue into the pre-dawn hours, and then as we go into tomorrow, we are going to see organization as the temperatures start increasing and as the stronger wind field begins organizing out there in far east Texas and Louisiana. In the northern plains, some rather warm temperatures. Nebraska up to the 50s, even some 50s in southwestern South Dakota. Up to the northern Minnesota, they were in the 20s. Across the southwestern states, we mentioned that upper level low located around Gallup and Grants this evening. Temperatures were rather cool. 60s in the lower deserts, 30s and 40s in the Four Corners and Great Basin. As far as Phoenix goes, they've been in a drought. Phoenix, located right here. One media source that I saw said that Phoenix received 0.01 yesterday, ending a drought of 159 consecutive days without measurable rainfall, just short of the 160-day record. However, I looked at the coded reports and the meteor observations. I only saw a trace. So that would continue them into the 160-day point. Maybe somebody can clarify this. Some rather cold conditions coming up for tonight. California looking at 30s just about everywhere except for the southern coast. San Francisco will hang on to 44 degrees, but elsewhere 30s, and we do have a freeze warning in effect for the southern San Joaquin Valley from about Merced down to Fresno and Bakersfield. The cities themselves should hold on to about 36, but in the outlying areas it could be down to 29. And then checking out weather for the northwestern U.S., fair skies across much of the region. They remain under an upper ridge today, but it is beginning to break down as an upper-level trough approaches late this week. Temperatures were in the 40s and 50s all through the Pacific Northwest, 30s further in the interior. Winter storm watches have been issued for tomorrow night, Friday, and Saturday for the Cascades, and another winter storm watch out there in the Bitterroots, the Northern Rockies. That runs Friday evening through the entire weekend, and we've got air stagnation advisory still in effect for the interior. Those should be falling off as this next system comes inland. We shift our attention into the Pacific. There's our blocking high, which is starting to fall apart as this system approaches. Going up into Alaska itself, their weather is being replaced by this 1038 millibar high, moving across the Bering Strait and bringing much colder and drier air to the interior. You can see those temperatures already dropping off into the minus 20s and minus 30 range. Here's a close-up look at the weather in Alaska. We do have a low-pressure system south of Valdez. Blizzard warnings in effect where we have this tight pressure gradient that's kicking up snow in the passes of south central Alaska. We have a blizzard warning for tomorrow and tomorrow night in southwestern Alaska as this Bering Sea system approaches. Let's take a look at the weather over the next few days. We see those pressure gradients really picking up there in the southwest part of the state. Big ridge out to the east, 1046 millibar high, and that's going to mark an area of Arctic air, which will gradually shift to the east into Canada. A quick look at the weather in Canada shows an extension of that Arctic high into the Northwest Territories. Further south, weather system in Alberta, unsettled conditions across British Columbia. We do have a few snowfall warnings, one around Muncho Lake, the other just east of Prince George. Some snow in the Canadian Prairies, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. Here we have a look at the extent of the Arctic air, that one lobe across Alaska itself, the second lobe through Nunavut and the Northwest Territories. So looking at the forecast in Canada itself, tracking the progress of this cold air, we can see this western system become dominant going into the weekend, and that slides down into British Columbia and Alberta. So we could see some big weather changes in British Columbia and Alberta as well. Now, typically when we see these 1050, 1060 millibar highs, those do move into the lower 48 rather quickly. However, this system is going to be kept in check by the deep southwesterly flow down there in the U.S. It probably does not help that we're going into MJO Phase 5. That tends to be very warm in that part of the country, so a couple of negative aspects. Some of that cold air will come down into the northern plains, maybe some cool conditions in the central plains, but really not a whole lot of air coming south. Most of it heads into eastern Canada. So the remainder of the sequence, yeah, lots of cold across Canada, but just not really coming very far south. There's a second surge of cold air in the Hudson Bay region, but that is not positioned to come into the U.S. either. All right, let's take a look at that forecast, and we'll put the maps into motion. So there's the current setup. Then going into tonight, thunderstorms along that Pineapple Express area, the belt of lift along that warm front, warm advection, low-level jet, all that coming together right there along the Interstate 35 corridor in Texas. By tomorrow morning, things are starting to shift into East Texas and Arkansas. So there's the map at noon. We're probably going to see widespread 70s across the deep south behind this warm front. 70s from Austin to Shreveport, over to Jackson, Birmingham, Jacksonville. May even see 80s around Tampa and Fort Myers. In the Midwest region, up to the north, looking at 40s and 50s. Some of that warm air flowing north, looking at 53 at Chicago and Green Bay, 44 at Detroit. In the Rockies, we've got snow persisting in parts of eastern Colorado, but those will be diminishing. It should stay mostly rain where it falls in the panhandles. You can see these winds here, 35 knots sustained, so we could see dust starting to form in that area right there, especially towards late afternoon. Secondary cold front working south, and you can see that mixed phase precipitation in the panhandles tomorrow evening. Rain spreading up into the Ohio River Valley, into Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. And on Friday, that upper level low, which you can see by the bullseye pattern right there, there it is on the move into Missouri. So by midday on Friday, everything moving rapidly to the east. Showers and storms into the Carolinas, Atlanta, and Alabama. And a new weather system coming in from the west into Oregon and Washington. We will see that snow picking up in the Cascades above 2,000 feet and above 5,000 in the Sierras. Then as we go into the weekend, looks pretty wet up there in the Pacific Northwest, a mix of rain and snow depending on your elevation and location. Central California, the Bay Area, Sacramento also getting rain into Sunday. Here's a taste of that Arctic air moving south. Forgot to draw an included front through here. And there it goes. And there it starts slowing down. You can see it already turning around there in Colorado. Winds out of the southeast right there for early Tuesday. And just not much of a push south. The 540 decameter line remains up in Iowa, Nebraska, and Wyoming. So even behind the front there in the Ozarks, rain, and some indication of rain there in Nebraska. So towards the end of next week, rainy in the southeast along this tail end of the front, some warm advection working on that frontal zone. Very rainy in California. Not sure if Southern California is going to get any of this, but definitely the Bay Area, Sacramento, Reno, the Sierras will be getting hit pretty hard. And that's going to be the last frame that I have, troughing on the west coast and ridging in the central U.S. So it looks been on the mild side towards the end of next week in Texas, Arkansas, Missouri, and rather cool in the western states. And that will be it for your Wednesday edition of Forecast Lab. Thank you very much for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you back here on Friday for another edition. I hope you have a great Wednesday evening, and we'll see you in a couple days. Bye-bye.